You would expect gorillas in a zoo to be less in touch with their animalistic instincts due to being outside of the wild for so long. I mean, that's only normal. People, animals, they do tend to change when they're out of their natural habitat. But no, that was not the case with this gorilla, as he did not flinch even for a second before jumping at the first opportunity of attacking Jeff McMullen. Before we get into this terrible event, I kindly ask you to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you become a member of the GRUESOME family. Thank you in advance. Animals and humans have not always been enemies. It's not a man versus wild situations all the time, in case you were wondering. Let me ask you, do you think animals attack humans for fun? Or is there a reason behind their actions or reactions, so to say? Whatever your answer might be, one thing is certain, is that the answer to these questions will always remain contingent on the specific situation at hand. There is no one right answer. Gorillas are those misunderstood primates of the jungle, just like every other animal over there, to be honest with you. Well, yeah, it is understandable. People do generally perceive them to be giant, hairy beasts, but deep down, they're just big softies, unless you give them a reason not to be. What this essentially means is that it's not their general tendency to be aggressive towards human beings. In fact, they're typically peaceful and social animals. However, nobody is without their faults, so why would gorillas be any different? So just like any other animal, if worst comes to worst, or if they feel threatened or provoked, they would not think twice before doing everything in their power to defend themselves. But we can't even blame them for it, right? Isn't that exactly what we would do too? Then why should we expect any different behavior from animals and have different standards for them and for us? So the gist of the story is that if you ever came across a gorilla and see it acting aggressively, don't panic. Just calmly follow the instructions of trained professionals and give the gorilla plenty of space. However, this is where things get tricky in the present situation, because how do you give a gorilla space in a cage? More importantly, is it even possible to give space to them in the zoos? Seems like giving space is not important in just human relationships when your partner is mad at you, but it is also important in the gorilla world. The current instance might not have occurred if the reporter was capable of giving space to the gorilla. I mean, who knows? It's anyone's guess. We'll get back to the case at hand pretty soon. Just know that gorillas are generally peaceful animals, but they're also wild animals. And you know what you have to do with wild animals, right? Not make them your enemy. And one step towards avoiding this is that you treat them with caution and respect. So, if you want to continue to live your life, just make sure that you're following the guidelines for a safe and enjoyable encounter. We'll revisit this section a little later in the video, as right now, we'll move on to the incident that transpired within the four walls of the cage at the zoo. The incident that neither us nor the reporter in the cage could have anticipated. The grim reality is what exactly transpired in that cage still remains unknown. Why the gorilla reacted the way it did cannot be pinned down. So you might as well make up your own theories. Do you think the gorilla was hungry? Do you think the gorilla especially liked to eat people? Do you think the gorilla was a rebel who didn't want to be a herbivore? I mean, who knows? It could have been anything and everything. But what we do know is that a gorilla is a rather lazy animal who would not ideally go out of its way to attack people. It generally doesn't get mad and start attacking people like crazy because why would they? It's not like they feast on people's flesh for Christmas. So, do you know that if a gorilla is looking at you with blood in its eyes, you are the reason? As Callum Scott said, it means that you pulled the trigger and now you must suffer the consequences of your mistake. Just like Newton said, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. One heroic story that is often recounted when talking about gorillas and their compassion is the one of Jambo. Jambo the gorilla was the biggest, baddest ape at the Jersey Zoo. He got muscles on his muscles and he was not afraid to use them. But as it turns out, Jambo did not just have muscles but a soft spot too, especially when it came to little kids in trouble. One day, a kid named Levon falls into Jambo's enclosure. The other gorillas are ready to make a snack out of the kid, but Jambo was not having any of it. He walked up to Levon, gave him a gentle tap, and then stood guard over him like a furry bodyguard. Yeah, you heard that right. Jambo, the alpha gorilla, was protecting a human like its own baby. It was like something out of a superhero movie. And when the zoo staff finally showed up to rescue Levon, Jambo was all like, "Peace out, I'm gonna go back to eating my bananas." So the takeaway from this story basically is that don't mess with gorillas, but also don't underestimate them. They might surprise you with their compassion and their strength, just don't expect them to give you a hug. They're still wild animals after all. While we simply cannot put a finger on what made the meander attack like it did, what was its trigger? We can sure make our guesses. However, before we further delve into the incident, let's take some time to know about the infamous protagonist of today's story. Before we continue with this unbelievable event, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Thanks in advance. The meander was one of Lambo's 15 kids, currently habiting the John Espinel Zoo in the beautiful country of England. Some people are a firm believer of being in close physical contact with the animals. To be honest, to me it sounds like a whole lot of traps to increase the revenue for hospitals. As per them, there is only one thing between us and the gorillas, and that was our fear. If we only could overcome that fear, nothing would stop us from becoming their friends. But the question that arises is, are we supposed to be friends with such wild animals? Is it something that's even safe in the first place? Should we prioritize our life or the pursuit of our friendship with a gorilla? Apparently for Jeff, friendship was simply not the right answer. Jeff was there at the zoo for the purpose of exploring the relationship between animals and humans, but that could have cost him his life. So the events that led up to this were pretty out of the blue. One moment, Peter, the zookeeper, got to know that the lock was not opening the meander's cage, and just the next moment, she dropped off from 20 feet up. That was certainly a scary turn of events. Generally, while this is not what happened, it can still happen when animals get excited. What this means is that the animals are capable of getting excited just like humans, except that the consequences of an animal getting excited is far worse than ours. In that moment, it was a tricky situation and Jeff was caught completely off guard. He had to immediately make exit out of the cage by means of using a hose so as to keep the meander in her tracks. The situation got so frisky that the lock had to be cut using bolt cutters. The reason for her behavior remains unknown, but if we were to make a random guess, it would have been a tactic to establish hierarchy as a newcomer was there in the cage. However, this action of establishing hierarchy could have cost Jeff a great deal, as it's not a very funny thing to have a 150-pound animal jumping on you from such a height. So what this shows us is that no matter how friendly an animal might seem, they're still wild animals at the end of the day and not your neighbor. This is the reason why distinctions have been made between wild and pet animals, and it is for the same reason why you can keep a Labrador as your pet, but not a gorilla. So next time, even when you see an animal getting too friendly, keep your distance, as you don't want a 100 or 200-pound animal pouncing on you like it's WWE. And since you stuck with me till the end, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. And if you haven't already, I'd like to ask you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.